starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sporty's webinar on ADS-B, A Pilot's Guide. My name is Eric Radke, and I'm serving as your webinar facilitator for this evening. So to all you pilots across the globe, welcome to our virtual classroom this evening on a very important topic to everyone in aviation. We have with us as our presenter tonight, Sporty's resident ADS-B expert, John Zimmerman. We're going to get to know a little bit more about John in just a moment. Before we move into that, I wanted to take care of just a few housekeeping items as we get started with the presentation. Probably most importantly to know is that we are recording tonight's presentation and we'll make this available free on the Sporty's website, sportys.com/webinars. So if you do have to step away or if you do miss a point you would like to review, do know that you will be able to come back in just a couple of days and review the entire presentation in the webinar archive. I would also invite you throughout the presentation to submit questions via the GoToWebinar software, and we will attempt to carve out some time despite a very full agenda at the very end to pose some of those questions to our presenter, John Zimmerman. So with that, let me tell you a little bit more about John. Again, I mentioned John is the resident Sporty's ADS-B expert. John is responsible for that beautiful Pilot Shop, Sporty's Pilot Shop catalog that sits on everyone's coffee table and has been heavily involved in all of the ADS-B products that are offered by Sporty's. John also writes extensively for Sporty's online publication, iPad Pilot News, and also serves as editor of Sporty's Airfax Journal. So if I could just sidebar for just a second, for both of those online publications, Airfax Journal and iPad Pilot News, those are absolutely free. They're written specifically for the active pilots out there, which by virtue of you all being here tonight, that's you. So if you're not a subscriber, if you're not a reader, I invite you to search, go online, sign up, and join in that conversation. So, and I should mention John's an active pilot, and he's going to tell you a little more about that too. So, John, welcome. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Great to be here as always, Eric.
Now, as we get started, we have a full classroom tonight, and I have to assume that there's a lot of airplane owners out there. And here we are approaching the kind of closing months of 2014, if you can believe it. I really can't. And I feel like as we approach 2015, this mandate, this 2020 mandate, starts to feel a little bit more real. So to start us off, is this real? Should we all be concerned, all the airplane owners? Should we be scheduling, time in the avionics shop this coming January to get this ADS-B thing worked out? Is the FAA going to postpone it? I mean, can you dispel any of those myths or rumors, or tell us what's what?
Yeah, I think there's two thoughts on that. First is that I think 2014 has been a bit of a tipping point in a way. It seems like this is the year that really ADS-B got some momentum and really started taking off. We've been talking about it forever, and it seems like it really got going this year. Pilots are really out there installing it. And the reason why is because I think it's less about the mandate and what the FAA declares you have to do. For what it's worth, I don't see them moving that deadline. They've pretty well dug in their heels on that. But I think it's less about the mandate and what you have to do and more about why you might want to do it. Now, none of us want to go out and spend thousands of dollars, but as we'll show you tonight, there's some reasons why ADS-B is not all bad. So oftentimes we fall into the trap of thinking of ADS-B as just like a tax we have to pay. And hopefully I can show you tonight that there's actually some good parts to it that may be a reason to go out and do it and enjoy it and use it instead of just viewing it as a box you have to check.
Well, I'm certainly glad you brought that up because there's a lot of conflicting information, obviously, that is out there. Well, I know you have a full agenda, so John, I'm going to let you just take it away from here.
Great. Thanks, Eric, and thanks again for everybody for being here tonight. We're going to cover a lot of ground when it comes to ADS-B because there's a lot to talk about. Eric mentioned a little bit about me. I get to work there at Sporty's, best place in the world, and get to fly with a lot of different stuff. I've been flying with the iPad really since it came out about over 4 years ago, and been flying with ADS-B products for the last couple years as well. I get to fly everything from helicopters to turboprops and everything in between, and have had a good chance to see a lot of this stuff in action. So I want to share with you tonight some information, as the title says, a pilot's guide. We're not going to get down into the nitty-gritty too much. I'm going to give you some background so you understand what's going on, but I don't come to you as an avionics technician or an engineer, but really as a pilot. We're going to focus on what it means to the pilot. That's our goal. As Eric mentioned, iPad Pilot News, don't want to give you the hard pitch on it other than there is going to be a recording of this webinar up there. There are lots of tips and tricks about ADS-B. So if you're looking to really dive in and get more information, I encourage you to check out iPad Pilot News. It's 100% free. There's an email newsletter you can sign up for. And there's some really helpful information there, in particular for ADS-B stuff. So check out iPad Pilot News. Give you a quick overview of the presentation. We're going to start out with what is ADS-B, because we throw the word around all the time and I'm not sure everybody really understands what it means. So let's define it. We're going to talk about some key terms and what those really mean so we understand. We're going to talk about how it really works in the background, what it does. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about panel mount avionics, and then a little bit of time talking about portable avionics and the differences between those and what they can and can't do. And then finally, we'll end with some tips and advice for flying with ADS-B. And I want to start out with a quick poll here. You'll have a poll pop up on the screen here. ADS-B, we talk a lot about weather really when we talk about ADS-B. So how many of you out there are flying with XM weather already, say on board in a panel mount unit or a Garmin GPS? How many are flying with ADS-B weather, a Stratus, a GDL39? How many of you cheat and just try to get your cell phone to work? I know you're out there. And how many of you aren't flying with any weather right now? Just take a second and answer on the screen and we'll total it up.
John, the poll is out, and a little more than 40% are not flying with any weather. Close to a little more than half of our participants tonight, though, are flying with either ADS-B or XM.
Okay, great. Well, we'll have something for all of you to look at and see what might make sense for you. So let's start with an ADS-B system overview here, just so that we all understand what we're really talking about with ADS-B. And before I do that, a couple quick caveats here. ADS-B is a huge topic, really mind-numbing in its complexity. We're going to focus mostly on the weather and traffic part and mostly on the iPad. We're going to hit plenty of other things, but there's just no way to cover every last part of ADS-B tonight, and so that's the part we'll talk most about. A note that really a lot of what we talk about here does apply to the US. ADS-B is happening in other parts of the world, but it's happening in a different way. And so for the most part, what I talk about here applies to the US. And then the other thing I'll mention is that things are changing rapidly. There's the systems growing, there's new avionics. So stay tuned. This is not a set it and forget it kind of subject that you can think you've got to figure it out today, because in 6 months, it will have changed. So a real quick history of where ADS-B came from. It was not dreamed up in some layer deep inside of the FAA to make pilots' lives miserable. At least I don't think so. What it really came out of is the Capstone program in Alaska. And if some of you who've been flying for a while may remember stories about Capstone, this was really a grand research project in Alaska to see if we could use new technology to improve safety, which frankly, the safety record in Alaska was pretty awful. And so the thought was, could we use new GPS receivers and a ground network of transmitters and new transponders and data link weather? Could we use all this technology as a system and not just have gadgets, but actually be safer? And the answer after Capstone wrapped up was really unequivocally yes. It really did improve safety. Out of Capstone came the idea of ADS-B and more broadly NextGen. So really what we're talking about now is built on the success of that program. The final ADS-B out rules were finalized by the FAA in 2011. And what that means is this is really settled law here. So this is not an emerging thing. Yeah, there's emerging avionics. Pilots are kind of getting up to speed on what it means, but this is pretty well set in stone what you have to do and what you don't have to do. Also, the ground station network, at least in its initial implementation, is complete. And there are a lot of options for hardware, as we'll show tonight. There are a number of options for both portable and panel mount. My point here is this is a pretty mature system now. ADS-B is pretty much up on its own 2 feet and is into adulthood here. So with that history in mind, let's define some terms. And this is where ADS-B really gets confusing. So I'll ask you to kind of buckle up for the next 10 minutes here as we unpack what these terms mean, because a lot of these acronyms get thrown around. Meaningless jargon is spoken here to the nth degree when it comes to ADS-B. And I think it's really important to understand what all of these things mean, because if you get in a room with pilots, sometimes these words get thrown around and nobody understands really what we're talking about. So let's define some things like NextGen and ADS-B and 1090 and all this stuff. Let's walk through it. First is NextGen, short for Next Generation Air Transportation System. This is a huge FAA multi-year, multi-billion-dollar program to really transform the way our air traffic control system works in America. It's really going from a ground-based radar system to a more satellite-based, more network-based system. It's a massive project. The FAA has a lot of selling to do because they need a lot of money for this. And so the goals of NextGen, as you can see, sound pretty darn good. They think NextGen will shorten routes, save time and fuel, reduce traffic delays, increase capacity, increase safety. I added the last one there about world peace and free beer because I think that's the only thing they left off. I mean, seriously, if a program from the FAA could actually shorten routes, save time, increase safety, reduce delays, it would be a miracle. Now, I say that facetiously. Obviously, I think ADS-B and NextGen can do some of this, but it's important to understand that NextGen is sort of this umbrella term for all these programs to modernize the aviation system. Specifically, ADS-B does not equal NextGen. ADS-B is one of the 5 major elements of NextGen. So sometimes people will use those interchangeably, but that's really not accurate. NextGen involves a lot of air traffic control technology, a lot of back-end stuff that we as pilots never see. So tonight we're going to drill down and focus on that ADS-B portion. Okay, great. So what the heck is ADS-B? Well, like everything in flying, it seems like it's an acronym. And actually, in this case, while ADS-B is an ugly name to look at maybe, it's very descriptive. It stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. And each of those pieces really describes what it does. So ADS-B is automatic in that it works in the background. There's not something the pilot has to do. This is constantly running in the background. It's dependent, and this is the key piece, because it depends on all the different aircraft out there being equipped with the right avionics. Whereas radar can be sort of passive and just ping targets out there, ADS-B really depends on all of us being equipped properly. So that's the dependent part. Surveillance means it's simply a way to track aircraft, just like radar is a surveillance technology, ADS-B is a surveillance technology. And then finally, broadcast. And this is the piece where aircraft broadcast their position and velocity. Again, they're not waiting on a radar sweep to ping their aircraft and go back. They're constantly broadcasting. So ADS-B, Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. Now within ADS-B, it really gets fun. We have ADS-B out and ADS-B in. And these are probably the 2 phrases that you hear most when you talk about ADS-B. You'll talk about in and out, or this product's in, this one's out, this one's in and out. So let's take a look at what that really means. ADS-B out is that surveillance technology we talked about. This is the part where your aircraft reports out its position, its velocity, its altitude, and it's continuously reporting this once per second, telling everybody out there, here's where I am, here's where I'm going. This is installed in the aircraft. This is what really feeds air traffic control. ADS-B out, this is the part that comes into play when you talk about the mandate, the 2020 mandate that you have to have ADS-B out. It's really basically everywhere you need a transponder today, you'll need ADS-B out. So Class A above 18,000 feet, Class B, Class C airspace above 10,000 feet in Class E airspace. So for the most part, if you need Mode C transponder today, you're going to need ADS-B out. But it's important to understand that this is the ADS-B out only part. That's what the mandate is talking about. ADS-B in, you can probably figure out, is the part where the information comes into the airplane. So this is most vividly put, as you see on screen there, as weather and traffic. And this is really what we talk about when we talk about portable receivers like the Stratus there. If you're looking at weather on your iPad from ADS-B, that's ADS-B in. And ADS-B in is great. It's subscription free. It gives you traffic, gives you weather, gives you NOTAMs. The important thing to note here again, ADS-B in equipage is totally optional. So there's no mandate by 2020 to have ADS-B in. The mandate is for ADS-B out. Okay, so that's ADS-B in and out. It's actually pretty simple. It makes sense. One part's reporting out, one part's receiving in data. But for reasons that are too boring and complex to get into tonight, there are 2 frequencies for both ADS-B in and out. 978 and 1090 megahertz. And this is really where it can get confusing. There were concerns about frequency congestion, and originally there was just going to be 1090, and they didn't think they could handle that, so they came up with this 978. So let's talk about what that means. As the screen says, we're really just talking about 2 different data links. 1090 megahertz extended squitter. You'll hear this referred to as 1090 ES. And then 978 megahertz, a universal access transceiver, or UAT. So a lot of times you'll hear UAT or 1090 ES thrown around. That's really what we're talking about here is two different data links. It's still ADS-B in and out. It's just over what frequency are they transmitted. The reason we mention this, though, is that there are differences in what they really mean and what they do. So let's look at each of these. Let's look at 1090 ES out and in, and then 978 UAT out and in. Let's try to understand what those mean. Start with 1090 ES ADS-B out. So your transponder that you have today, your Mode C transponder, is 1090 megahertz. So this is really based on that. It's basically an upgraded transponder. And this was the original concept, was we just upgrade our transponders and that would make us ADS-B out compliant. You can do that today. So as we'll talk about later, a Garmin GTX 330 transponder, a Mode S transponder, in most cases can be upgraded to a 330 ES extended squitter to get that ADS-B out. And so this is sort of the standard worldwide. 1090 ES is what you're going to use outside the US. It's also required above 18,000 feet. So if you ever fly to Canada or Mexico, or you fly a pressurized airplane, 1090 ES is the frequency you will use. Also important to note that 1090 ES out, this must be certified and installed. There's no such thing as a portable 1090 ES out. These are panel mount products. 978 UAT ADS-B out. What's the difference? Well, this one is only allowed in the US and it's only allowed below 18,000 feet. This was really developed for general aviation pilots, piston airplanes, again, partly to address that frequency congestion issue, but partly to try to have a lower cost product. One important note you see there is that if you use UAT, you still have to have a transponder, a Mode C transponder. And that's really so airlines' TCAS systems, their traffic collision alert systems, can work. So if you put in a 978 system, you still need to have that transponder. Again, ADS-B out, it has to be certified and installed. Okay, let's talk about in. 1090 ES in. 1090 ES in, very simply, is traffic. That's what sums it up. So 1090 ES is really a traffic data link. It can detect other aircraft, so-called air-to-air. So if there's another 1090 out equipped airplane, you can receive that via your 1090 in. You can also receive uplink traffic information from the ground. But the key piece is that 1090 in does not receive weather. This can be portable or installed. ADS-B in, you can have a portable. 978 in is really what we talk about the most, especially with portables. This is weather and traffic. So it can detect other aircraft air-to-air. Again, if there's a 978 out equipped airplane and you have a 978 in receiver, you can pick up that aircraft direct air-to-air. You can also get traffic information uplink from the ground. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And 978 in, the key piece, this is the technology that lets you receive weather. These, again, can be installed or they can be portable. So the question is, are you confused yet? And it's hard not to be. Really, no one would draw up a system this way from scratch, but it's sort of the system we've been left with. I'll try to simplify it in one screen here. 1090 out is really, think turbine. So this is above 18,000 feet international. This is an enhanced transponder. You can put it in your Cessna, but that's a quick way to remember it. 978 out, this is piston airplanes flying in the US. 1090 in, traffic only. 978 in, traffic and weather. So that's a good, I think, summary of really what these mean. Again, the top two, think transponders. The bottom two, think data link. Those can be portable or installed. Now, there's two other terms we're going to mention very briefly, and I don't like to use these much because I think they're just needlessly confusing, but you will hear them thrown out, so let's at least define them. The first one is FISB, or Flight Information Services Broadcast. This just means weather, really. So if you've got a Stratus or a GDL39 and you're looking at weather in your iPad, that's FISB. That's the text weather, the radar, the TFRs, the NOTAMs. It's continuously broadcast. I'd rather just call that weather, personally. Same for TISP. So this is Traffic Information Services Broadcast. This is the traffic report you would receive on an ADSB in device. We're going to talk about traffic here for a little bit because it's very, very confusing, and I know there's a lot of questions on it. Try to simplify it. Let's start here by just saying that TISB is not the same as Mode S or TIS traffic. So some of you may have flown an airplane or maybe flying right now an airplane that has a Mode S transponder like a Garmin GTX 330, and you get that Mode S traffic when you're within about 30 miles of a major airport. That's not the same thing. That's called TIS, but that's slightly different. I can't make that up. But important to understand that that is a different product. That's not the same as TISB that you receive through ADSB. Okay, so let's go behind the scenes a little bit and look at how this ADSB system works. And in particular, the traffic part's confusing, but I think if you understand how it works, it really will improve your usability with it, and we'll have a better appreciation for how it should work and how to diagnose it if something's not working properly. So let's talk about traffic. This is by far the number one question, the most confusing question about it. And I'll start with traffic by talking about weather. And the point is, weather is broadcast continuously. Weather is easy. Weather is an AM radio. It's just out there pumping away all the weather. And if you've got your radio tuned in to receive weather, you get it. Easy. There's nothing to do. Traffic is different. I'd equate traffic to text messaging versus that AM radio. Traffic is ground stations broadcasting, but unlike weather, where it's just broadcast to everybody, traffic reports are only broadcast in response to specific requests. And in this case, what that is a request from an ADSB out aircraft. So if I'm flying along and my airplane has ADSB out, I transmit out my ADSB out position, and that goes to the ground station. The ground station says, I'm awake, I see an ADSB airplane. I'm going to send back up to him what we call the hockey puck. I'm going to send him all the aircraft that are within 30 miles of him, 30-mile diameter, and plus or minus 3,500 feet. But this is a customized traffic picture that is centered on my airplane as ADSB out. So if somebody's close to me, they can sort of sniff my hockey puck of traffic and see everybody around me, but it's centered on me, not you. And that's important to remember. And since right now most airplanes don't have ADSB out, traffic is not broadcast all the time. You've got to be hoping that someone else out there has ADSB out. Except there's this air-to-air piece, and I mentioned that earlier. You'll always receive air-to-air because this is just aircraft to aircraft. This has nothing to do with ground stations. So if another airplane out there is broadcasting 1090 out, and if I've got a 1090 receiver, I will see that airplane broadcasting directly because I don't need air traffic control or ground station or anything to interpret that. That is aircraft to aircraft, I see that. So that's the air-to-air piece. Traffic is really made up of both that direct airplane to airplane and then also the uplink traffic from the ground stations. Let's put this in some pictures, and I think maybe it'll simplify it a little bit. Run through 3 scenarios here of how traffic works. Here's the most common one. Let's imagine I'm flying along with a Stratus. So I have a portable ADSB in receiver, but I don't have ADSB out in my airplane. What will I see? Well, there's this Baron up there who is ADSB out equipped. And so I'll see him because I'll see him air to air. I'll pick him up directly. That works great. But I won't see that Cessna 172 over there that just has a Mode C transponder, and I won't see that Pilatus behind me that has a Mode C transponder. So I've got a pretty limited traffic picture. That's air-to-air only. Let's look at scenario 2 now. In this case, I still am flying with my Stratus portable receiver, and I still don't have ADSB out in my airplane. But I'm flying close to another airplane that does have ADSB out, and there's a ground station in range here. So you can see what's happened. We're inside that Baron's hockey puck. So I'm going to see the Baron, but I'm also going to see that Cessna 172 because he's in that Baron's hockey puck. So everybody that's in that hockey puck will show up for me. So as a pilot, I can look in the bottom right corner there at my screen on ForeFlight and say, wow, I see traffic. Isn't that helpful? And it is. It's great. And that information is very accurate. The point is, look at the Pilatus behind you that you don't see because he's outside the hockey puck. You don't see him, and you don't know you don't see him because you don't really know where that hockey puck is. Now let's look at the third, and this is the best situation. This is where I'm flying along with a Stratus, but I also have ADS-B out in my panel. So here I am sending down the message to the ground station. I am getting that customized traffic package sent back up to me. So I see everybody because it's my own hockey puck. And so I see everybody within a 30-mile diameter in that hockey puck. So this is really the ultimate solution. By 2020, when we all have to equip with ADS-B out, this is what we'll all have. We'll all have this wonderful traffic picture because we'll all be creating our own hockey puck of traffic information. But the important thing to understand is right now, most of us aren't in this situation, so we're depending on other people out there. It works fine. The point to remember is you don't see everybody and you need to stay vigilant because you don't know what you don't know. So here's the key takeaway I think I made clear. Unless you are squawking ADS-B out and creating your own customized hockey puck of information, you are not getting a complete picture of surrounding traffic. What you see is great and it's helpful, but it's supplemental only. So until you have ADS-B out in your panel, you're going to get an incomplete traffic picture. That's the simplest way to sum it up. And here's just a before and after. You can see on the right, we're not ADS-B out equipped. We see a little bit of traffic. We are ADS-B out equipped. In the left hand, there's an Aztec with ADS-B out, and we see everybody. All right, enough on traffic. Let's talk about weather. In a lot of ways, frankly, weather is a more important product for ADS-B in, I think. It's more meaningful. Certainly, DataLink weather has changed the way I fly over the last 10 years. ADS-B works a lot like other DataLink if you've used XM weather. It's very similar. I'll point out some differences here because they are different. But in general, it's the same basic idea. It's data-linked weather. The one important difference is that ADS-B is ground-based stations, whereas XM is satellite-based. ADS-B is ground-based. And there are different types of stations. You can see there's actually 4 there: surface, low, medium, and high. This doesn't really matter in everyday flying other than to understand that each station transmits different weather information. So if you're lucky enough to be, say, in Florida where there's a number of surface stations, you'll get ADS-B weather on the ground, and that's great. But you're only going to get a few weather products. For example, you're only going to get radar within 150 nautical miles. You get up in cruise, you get up in flight, you'll get a high altitude station, you'll get the entire continental U.S. radar, you'll get 250 nautical miles of regional radar, you'll get much more. So yeah, there's differences here. It's worth knowing. Again, in practice, you're going to be receiving 8 or 9 or 10 stations of all types, so it really doesn't matter a whole lot. But there are different types. It's worth knowing that. And more than anything, it's worth knowing that you're probably not going to get ADS-B weather on the ground, except for those few airports that have a ground-based station. Here's the timing. How old is the weather? And again, I'd sum this up by saying it's pretty much like most DataLink. It's about 5 or 10 minutes old. It's extremely useful. No, you should not pick your way through tightly embedded cells with any DataLink weather product, and ADS-B is no different. But you can see it's about 5 or 10 minutes old. So the weather radar there is the one worth pointing out. There's actually 2 different radar packages. One's regional, and this is sort of a medium resolution that's transmitted every 2.5 minutes, very real time almost. The continental U.S. CONUS radar, that's lower resolution, and it's updated every 15 minutes. That's not a big deal because those radar pictures are usually pretty far out, right? They're beyond 150 or 250 nautical miles. So they're plenty good enough for strategic planning. But sometimes if you hear about 2 different radar packages with ADS-B, that's what we're talking about. Let's do a side-by-side then. If you're familiar with XM, which I think about a quarter of you tonight have flown with XM, here's a comparison between the two. Again, pretty similar, some differences. Again, in general, XM, you get nationwide METARS, TAFs, winds aloft. With ADS-B, it's usually limited to more within about 500 miles of you, plus the larger Class B and C airports. Again, in my everyday flying, that's not much of a limitation. I don't fly a whole lot of flights over 500 nautical miles. And again, as you get closer to your destination airport, those will fall within the 500 nautical mile range, so they'll show up. Radar is a difference, and I'll show you the next slide, the difference there. What do you get and not get? Well, the only real main thing you don't get on ADS-B is ground-based lightning strikes and satellite imagery. Satellite in particular for me is more of a pre-flight tool. It's really not updated often enough to be much of an in-flight tool. But you do not have that on ADS-B. XM, the only 2 things you're really missing are special use airspace and NOTAMs. You do get NOTAMs in ADS-B, which can be a handy feature. At the bottom is probably the biggest difference. ADSB weather is subscription free. I won't say it's free because your tax dollars paid for it, but it's subscription free. You buy the receiver and don't have to pay a subscription for the weather. XM is anywhere from about $35 to $100 a month for it. So here's the radar picture, and you may have heard that ADSB radar is really blocky. And you look at that middle picture, and it certainly is. That's the national picture. It's blocky. The one on the left is XM. The one on the far right is that regional radar picture. Now, from my perspective, the one on the far right, the regional, and the XM, pretty comparable. Certainly the XM is maybe a little higher resolution and has some beautiful contouring to it. But my main point here is all three of those products are perfectly good for making a decision. Is anybody going to fly through that line of weather based on the national ADSB radar picture? There is no amount of high resolution photo work you can do there that's going to make me fly through it. And this is the big takeaway. Yeah, there are differences in resolution. XM is a premium product. XM is a great product. You pay a little bit more for it because it's a premium product. I don't think the limitations in ADSB radar, certainly at least for piston airplane pilots, are worth mentioning a whole lot, because in this example, it's red. That's a nasty line of storms. I'm not going to fly through there no matter what weather equipment I've got. So I mentioned that ADSB is ground-based. That does mean you need to be in range of a ADSB ground station to get weather. Here's the network. This is fully completed, although the FAA is talking about adding some more stations, but this is the initial batch of stations they're going to build. This map tries to estimate coverage at about 1,500 feet AGL. So some of those smaller gaps, for example, those will fill in as you get up to higher altitude. If you're cruising along at 8,000 or 9,000 feet, some of those gaps will fill in. And certainly if you fly east of the Mississippi, you've got excellent coverage just about everywhere. If you're in Florida, for example, you're going to have coverage at 200 feet off the ground. Out west, there certainly are a couple holes there in northern Nevada, western Kansas, but overall, really excellent coverage. And again, it's like a VOR, so the higher you go, the better. Altitude's your friend. You'll get better reception. Typical flight for me, I'm flying with 8 or 9 stations at least, and I've flown ADSB receivers all over the place. We're based in Cincinnati, Ohio, flown out to Oregon and California and to the Northeast, and coverage really these days is excellent. Unless you're in one of those gap areas, and those are pretty small, coverage is really pretty excellent. All right, so that's enough theory of how the system works. Let's actually talk about what these things look like in practice. So we're going to talk about panel mount products and then portable products, and then show you those in action. So panel mount, real quick, some of this is review, but if there's 5 things you got to know about ADSB, in particular when it comes to equipping your airplane for 2020, for the mandate, the 2020 mandate, here's 5 things to know. Again, ADSB out will be required in most airspace where Mode C transponder is required today. That's a short and sweet way of saying it. Number 2, a WAAS GPS must be included. So this is a critical point I'm going to talk about in a little bit. A lot of people think of the ADSB out mandate as just that, but it's really ADSB out plus a WAAS GPS. The reason is you're reporting your position, and air traffic control is using that to separate airplanes. So if your position is not extremely accurate and reliable, they really can't trust it. So that's why they require you to pair a WAAS GPS with your ADSB out. If you've got a Garmin 430W or a GTN 750, you've already got it. But if you've got a Garmin 430 that's not WAAS, for example, you're going to have to add a WAAS GPS in addition to your ADSB out. Point number 3, ADSB out compliance must be panel mount. So you're not going to meet the 2020 deadline with a portable. It's like the FAA, they don't allow a portable IFR approach approved GPS or a portable Mode C transponder. They want it tied to an N number, mounted in the airplane, and certified. But again, number 4, ADSB in equipage is optional. So the in part is totally up to you. And 5, again, you still need your Mode C transponder if you've got a 978 unit. So what can you buy today? Let's say that you saw those traffic pictures and decided, I'm going to go get ADSB out today so I can get a really good traffic picture. Or I'm just going to do ADSB out now and beat the rush for 2020. Good news is there are tons of options. There may even be too many options. I'm going to highlight 3 that I think are interesting. but there are certainly more than that. Start with the Garmin GDL88, probably the most popular one. Garmin's certainly the big dogs in panel avionics, and this is a great product. We've in our avionics shop here at Sporty's been installing a lot of these this year. This is a 978 or UAT product, and it's available in lots of different configurations. So you can get it as out only, you can get it as in, you can get it as in and out. You can get this with a built-in GPS. So if you didn't have a WAAS receiver, you can get it built in with this product, or you can get it without. You can get it with a single antenna or a dual antenna. So the GDL88 is actually a number of different products, and you can kind of build it depending on the airplane you have. So there's really good flexibility here. Obviously integrates well with Garmin's GTN and GNS series navigators, which there are hundreds of thousands out there, I think. It also integrates with the new Garmin Connect system. We won't get into too much tonight, but they announced that at Oshkosh this year. Pretty neat system where you can actually connect your portable avionics like your iPad and send flight plans to the panel and receive weather on your iPad from a GDL88. That's a separate box, the Connects box, but if you've heard anything about it, it does kind of turbocharge your GDL88. This is remote mounted. As you can see, this is mounted in the not directly in the avionics stack. It's mounted oftentimes in the tail in some airplanes. And Garmin just had a pretty big price cut on this. This now, starting out for the base model, is under $4,000. So prices have really got competitive. Garmin also does have a 1090 option. So if you're flying above 18,000 feet, they've got the GTX 330 ES. Again, this is sort of a souped up Mode S transponder. It is panel mounted. There's no GPS built into this, but it's a really solid option. It's pretty affordable. One thing to note here is that, again, if you have a GTX 330, one of the older Mode S transponder models, in most cases, you can upgrade that to a GTX 330 ES. It's a software change, costs a little bit of money, and you can be ADS-B out. So if you've got a GTX 330, you may be halfway there. Check with your avionics shop. Another popular one you see a lot of is FreeFlight. They were pretty early to the ADS-B game and have a number of different options. Again, the 978 and 1090, kind of like Garmin, you have your choice. You can add on a GPS. It's STC'd on lots of different airplanes. Also remote mounted and also starting under $4,000. So a very competitive one. FreeFlight also, Avidyne has a box. Aspen Avionics has a box. Bendix King has a box. There's lots of them out there. Some of those use a FreeFlight box for the internal. So FreeFlight's doing a lot of work in ADS-B. One more that you can't buy yet, but was introduced at Oshkosh and is kind of interesting. This is from Appario, the company that makes Stratus. This is a 1090. It's an all-in-one box. It's ADS-B out, and it includes the GPS automatically. So if you have a non-WAAS Garmin, this would take care of everything, be all in one. It also integrates with the Stratus 2 ADS-B receiver. So if you have a portable, the Stratus portable, you're kind of halfway done. The idea here is that this panel mount product would be your ADS-B out, and your Stratus would be your ADS-B in. And because it installs in the avionics stack, it'd be a pretty quick install. You don't have to remove a lot of the interior to install it. They haven't announced a price other than to say it's going to be very, very competitive. We'll see what that means. And it's shipping spring 2015. So can't order this one yet, but it's kind of one to watch because I think it takes a little bit of a different approach. So there's lots of options there. There's more that I didn't even cover. L3 has recently announced a line of products coming out. How do you pick one? Well, number one, like anything, talk to your avionics shop. But I think real quick, you can pick 1090 or 978. So if you ever fly outside of the US or you fly above 18,000 feet, you're done. You need 1090. So you can automatically go to that. If you fly below that and you don't fly outside the US, you can consider 978. Secondly, do you already have ADS-B in? If you have a portable, maybe you only need to put ADS-B out in the panel because you already have the in part with a portable. Some important questions I think to ask is total installation costs. This can be a lot depending on the type of box you install and depending on your airplane. So it's not just enough to see that whatever it is, $39.95 price. Get a quote, talk about the full install. Do you have to run, for example, do you need a WAAS GPS? A lot of people overlook this. If you have to install a WAAS GPS, that's additional. That probably means you need a new GPS antenna in your airplane. That probably means you need to run a new cable there. It may have to be installed in the tail of the airplane, which may mean the seats and the interior have to come out. So like anything, ask questions on your install. Make sure you have the total installation package in mind so you know really everything you're biting off before you get into it. It's probably going to be more than just that box. Finally, the FAA at a recent conference said they've seen a number of installation errors where ADS-B out isn't set up the right way. And it's just usually settings issue. It's not like a bad install, it's just a settings issue. There's a couple different ways to look at this. In ForeFlight, I'll show you later, there's a way to check it. Or the FAA, you can just email the FAA with your N number and your equipment and say, hey, how's my ADS-B look? And they'll send you back a full report. It's a really pretty neat service. It's really easy to do. The hardest part is the email address, which I've got there on screen, and you might want to write down because it is by no means easy to remember. But if you have ADS-B out and you want to check and see basically what's air traffic control seeing, you can email them. So the big question we get a lot is when to equip with ADS-B out. I don't think you should fall all over yourself running out to do it tomorrow. But I think now is a perfectly good time. I think the market's mature. There are plenty of options. Prices have come down. The system is built out. This quote from Vertical Magazine I thought was really good. It's a helicopter magazine, but the pilot was talking about flying a Cessna 310. He said, bottom line, equipping with ADS-B out now instead of waiting was clearly worth the investment and makes receivers like the Stratus so much more capable when it comes to traffic. So in his case, he did it to get better traffic. And the fact that he checked the box for 2020, great. But he really did it as an upgrade for his traffic. 10 years ago, we would have paid $10,000 or $20,000 for a traffic system in our airplane. Yeah, nobody's dying to spend $4,000 maybe, but if that gets you a really great traffic system in your airplane, that's a lot less expensive than it was even 10 years ago. So we're seeing a lot of people upgrade to ADS-B out now just for the features and less for the mandate. And my final point there is if you've got an old Mode C transponder, I would not throw a lot of money at fixing that. I would just replace it with an ADS-B out transponder. You're going to have to do it anyway, so certainly don't throw a whole bunch of money after a Mode C transponder. Okay, let's talk about portable receivers a little bit because that's really where a lot of the action's been lately. A lot of pilots have taken advantage of ADS-B in because you get a lot of the benefits of ADS-B, but for a lot less money. And particularly when it's paired with an iPad app, it's a really powerful thing. It's also great for renters or clubs. So if you don't own an airplane, you don't control the avionics in the panel, but you control the portables. Reminder that portables are ADS-B in only. And like we have with panel mount, there's lots of options. So to get started, a lot of the talk here with portables centers around apps. And I want to do a quick poll here and see what app you're flying with most often. The big three I hear most often talking to pilots is ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, and WingX. So pick one of those, or if you're flying with Jeppesen or FlyCube or something else, choose other. So we'll just another second here to vote and tally it up.
John, the results are in. The far and away leader is ForeFlight Mobile. Distant second would be Garmin Pilot.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about receivers for really all of these apps, but focus a little bit on ForeFlight maybe in terms of showing you how that's used, since that seems to be the majority here. So real quick, I'll give you an overview of the market. What are the portable receivers out there? And then probably more interestingly, we'll show what this really looks like in action. First is Sky Radar. These were really some of the first guys to do a portable receiver. It does ADS-B weather and GPS. It does that dual band traffic, so it receives air-to-air on both 978 and 1090. You can get a model with AHRS, an attitude heading reference system, that offers a backup attitude indicator. So really you've got weather, you've got GPS, you've got traffic, and you've got attitude. It's really an all-in-one box. It connects to your iPad by Wi-Fi, so it's wireless. It works with the WingX, Avilution, and iFly apps. It does require external power. There's no battery in this, so you need to run it off the cigarette lighter. And it's $689 or $849 for the model with the AHRS. Another option for WingX users is the iLevel SW and AW. These are ADS-B weather and GPS, as are all the products we'll talk about here. This one's only single band traffic. It has a built-in AHRS as well for that attitude piece. And there's an internal battery. The SW model even has a solar panel on top, so you can put it on the glare shield and give it a little charge as you fly. $11.95 for the SW, $13.95 for the AW. The AW adds pitot static, so if you're a home builder, you can really plumb this in with your whole avionics package and get really a full avionics display on your iPad. The Dual X GPS 170, probably the most popular one for WingX that we see. This is ADS-B weather and GPS. It's single band traffic, so it receives 978 traffic. It has a built-in battery, works with WingX, FlyQ, and some other apps, pretty universal. And it's $549.99. Prices come down on that one. SageTech has 2 models out in their Clarity line. This works with WingX and FlyQ as well. This has ADS-B weather and GPS. It says dual band traffic. The higher end model has that AHRS. It has a built-in battery, and it's a very, very small size, very lightweight. So again, all-in-one deluxe model here. $1150 or $1450 if you add the AHRS. Garmin, this is a very, very popular model, the Garmin GDL39 or the GDL39 3D. They both do ADS-B weather and GPS. They both have dual band traffic. The 3D, as you might guess, that adds the AHRS part, so you can get that 3D view like you see in the screenshot there on screen. Gives you really a synthetic vision view, which is phenomenal. It doesn't come with a battery by default, but you can buy it with a snap-on battery for a small additional charge. This works with the Garmin Pilot app, and it also works with Garmin GPSs, so this is kind of a unique feature. If you have a Garmin 796, say, and you wanted to run view ADS-B weather on both this Garmin 796 and your iPad, you can do that at the same time with the GDL39. So it's a pretty nice device. $549 for the basic one without battery. $899 is the deluxe one that includes AHRS and battery, everything ready to go. And then Stratus from Appario, probably the most popular one out there. This is ADS-B weather and GPS. There's 2 models available, single band or dual band traffic. The dual band model also adds AHRS for attitude. It's got a really good battery life of 8 hours, so it will go longer than your iPad will. It's totally wireless with a built-in battery, built-in antennas, and connects to your iPad by Wi-Fi. And it works with the ForeFlight mobile app. It was actually co-developed by ForeFlight. So like Garmin, Garmin develops their own app and the GDL39. ForeFlight has their app and worked in partnership to develop Stratus. So both of those receivers are really tightly integrated in the app, and we'll show you that a little bit later. $499 for the Stratus 1, single band and no AHRS. $899 for Stratus 2, which is dual band traffic and AHRS. So how do you choose one? That's a pretty staggering number of options there, really, which is a good thing. I think first choose the app. You got to live with your app every single day, whether you're using ADS-B or not. So if you're shopping for apps, try them all. They're almost all free to download and try out. I encourage you to shop around and see what makes sense for you. If you've got an app you like and you're good with, I'm not sure I'd go chasing hardware around between apps, because you really need to be comfortable with your app, especially if that's your charts for IFR flying. That's a really critical part. So I would stick with it. If you're using ForeFlight, that means a Stratus 1 or Stratus 2. If you're using Garmin Pilot, that means GDL39 or GDL39 3D. If it's WingX, SkyRadar, the Dual, the Clarity, or the iLevel. If you're using FlyQ, that's the Dual, the Clarity, or the iLevel. So I think this is a good way to start at least. Think about the app that you're using. So again, choose an app first. ADS-B reception, with the ground network built out these days, reception is really not a big issue in my experience. All of these have perfectly good reception. And if you have 4 stations versus 6, it really doesn't matter. So I don't see a big difference in terms of reception. I don't think that's a key feature necessarily to. Battery life is another important one. If you don't want to plug in your receiver, maybe you're a renter and you move around between airplanes, having a battery is a really nice feature. It's just fewer wires to worry about. So I'm a big fan of it. But if you own your airplane or you're a home builder and you want to build this in, a battery may not mean anything to you. So you can go without the battery model. Again, think about your airplane and the type of flying you do. Decide if traffic is important. If you have an onboard traffic system, maybe traffic really doesn't matter. Or if you've got ADS-B out already, single band traffic is fine, because again, you're creating that hockey puck. This whole dual band traffic idea is really just a workaround until we all have ADS-B out. And the idea is that since we're not ADS-B out, since we're depending on other people to have ADS-B equipment, by receiving 1090 and 978 in, we get the most air-to-air traffic we can. It's just a way to try to improve our traffic reception. It certainly doesn't mean we get 100%, but it does mean we get a little bit better. Do you fly IFR? If you do, that AHRS for the backup attitude is really nice and really helpful. If you're VFR only, that AHRS may not be a big deal, and you can save some money by choosing a model without it. Consider the hardware app integration. Again, Garmin and ForeFlight really deeply integrate. That's not to say the other apps do a bad job. It's just there's a little bit of a difference in philosophy there. Little things like how to do firmware upgrades. Sometimes those are easier when the hardware and the app are more deeply integrated. And finally, all of these include a GPS, so you don't need a separate bad ELF or a dual. If you've been flying with an external GPS, you don't need that. Any one of these will replace it and really be an all-in-one box. Okay, so with a little bit of time left, let's actually see what that looks like in action. And for this example, we're going to use ForeFlight because it looks like the majority you're flying with that. So we turn on our Stratus in this case, connect it by Wi-Fi, and then we open up ForeFlight. And it really works the same way in flight as it does on the ground. You just turn on layers. And if you're on the ground, you pull down that radar by connecting to the internet. If you're in flight, you pull down that radar image over ADS-B. So there's really no relearning the app. It works the same way. There's a great radar picture, give you a sense for it. You can overlay it on sectionals, IFR charts, or world map. You can switch back and forth. That's the beauty of the way all these layers work in all these different apps. METARs and TAFs, there's a couple different ways to look at it. In this case, you can put it on a map. I really like this because this gives you a great snapshot view of the trend. In this case, we're looking at visibility, so miles of visibility. You can get a real good sense, where is it good, where is it bad? You can see to the top right of the screen there, we got great visibility everywhere. Get down by this rain, it's not as good. And you can tap on any one of those for the full METAR. So here we've tapped on that 2 symbol. We get the raw METAR text. We also get it decoded in plain English below. You can see it says 13 minutes ago, ADS-B. That's how you know that it's been delivered by ADS-B and you know the age of it. METARs and TAFs can also be viewed on the airports page. That's the bottom left tab in ForeFlight. Just like you do on the ground, METARs, TAFs, winds aloft are all there. Again, you can see this was updated by ADS-B in this case. TFRs are a great one. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life post 9/11, and TFRs are transmitted by ADS-B. They're depicted graphically, and like everything else in ForeFlight, tap on a TFR and you get more information. Here you've got, most importantly, the effective date and time and also the altitudes. So don't be afraid to tap for more information on any of these things. AirMets and SIGMETs are great. You know, this is always one of my pet peeves. You're on the frequency and some controller says that there's an AirMet from 20 miles northwest to nowhere to 30 miles southwest to nowhere to 20 miles east of nowhere. And I always sit there and think, does anybody have any idea where that is? We're all furiously trying to draw that AirMet or SIGMET in our head. You can't do it. Well, with a data link like this, it's very easy to see where it is. Your route's overlaid, so you know whether it affects you or not. Again, tap on it. You can see altitudes. You can see times. Very, very helpful. For me, this makes AirMets actually usable again when once they were pretty hard to get along with. Pilot reports are also great. And here's an example where a pilot report in context is so much more meaningful. So I was flying home about a year ago and heard a report of severe turbulence on the radio. And that makes your heart stop. If you've ever been in that situation, you know, the idea of severe turbulence, and this was at our same altitude, really scares you. And so I'm starting to get nervous. And about 5 minutes later, up on my iPad pops up the pilot report. And this guy was smack dab in the middle of a bright red cell on the radar. Well, there's no wonder he had severe turbulence. This guy had flown into a thunderstorm. Needless to say, we went on home with a nice smooth ride. It really put me at ease, and it just shows the power of information and context. Here's an example where here's a pilot report of icing, and I can, again, tap on it for more information. Well, I can see the altitude, I can see what kind of airplane, but I can also see where it is in terms of the radar returns, and I can see where it is in terms of my route of flight. So all that information together is, to me, much more valuable than just a single PIREP alone. Winds aloft in ForeFlight, tap on any airport weather reporting station. Along the bottom there, you see METAR, TAF, and winds. tap on winds, and you'll see the altitude, the temperature, and the wind. NOTAMs is one of the nice features that we get over ADS-B, and those are in the airports page. Go to NOTAM, tap on NOTAMs, and you can read those. Traffic we talked a lot about previously. Just wanted to point out again, here's a traffic view. Pretty standard traffic terminology. The number above the target is how many feet it is above or below you. You see the plus and minus. You can see the little up or down arrow telling you if it's climbing or descending. And like everything, you can tap on it for more information. So here we've tapped on it, and it's Executive Jet Flight 375. You see his altitude, how far he is from you, his heading, his speed. Lots of great detailed information there. A reminder again, these have GPS. That enables all this terrain stuff that's really helpful in ForeFlight. The profile view, the hazard advisor if you're a pro subscriber. That's all available with the GPS. And then here's the attitude view. In ForeFlight, it's presented as a split screen. Tap that little attitude indicator symbol at the top, and it brings up a split screen view. This works in portrait or landscape, and that's giving you real-time pitch and roll in the middle. The tapes are GPS based, so obviously it's not airspeed. That's ground speed on the left, GPS altitude on the right, rate of climb, and then track down at the bottom. No, it's not a primary reference, and you should not use it that way, but it's a really handy backup. And certainly if the panel went dark in IMC, I would not hesitate to use this to get down to VFR weather. I want to close with a couple quick tips for flying with ADS-B, and then take some of your questions. In terms of connecting to your iPad, it's really very simple. Turn on your ADS-B receiver, open up the settings app on your iPad, and connect. It's either Bluetooth if it's a GDL39, or it's Wi-Fi if it's Stratus. Start the app, turn on weather overlays. You're done. It's really pretty automatic. Location really matters. So where you mount it really matters. Take some time in the airplane you fly to find where the best spot is to mount it. You need to balance a couple different ideas here. You're looking line of sight down to the ground for ADS-B. You're looking up to the sky for GPS. And you need to keep it relatively steady for the AHRS. It doesn't have to be perfectly level, but it can't move around to have that attitude picture be correct. And you want to think about not cooking this thing in the oven. Most of these newer generation models are pretty heat resistant, so it's not a big deal. But if you can keep it out of direct sunlight, it's probably a good idea, because your glare shield is incredibly hot if you ever put your hand up there. So if you can get it on a side window, that'll probably improve your reception and improve any of your heat issues. Again, every airplane's different. I've flown lots of different airplanes. There's always a right spot. It's just a matter of finding what it is in your airplane. If you do have reception issues, again, you can try a suction cup mount on the side window. There are external antenna options available. Don't worry about low versus high towers. You'll get lots. That's really not that important of an issue for you as a pilot. But it is important to check status. So make it a habit to check status. In ForeFlight, this is done on the maps page by tapping that little gear symbol at the top. And then at the bottom of that, you'll see a Stratus status menu. This is where you can see battery life, age of radar, how many towers you're getting, what your GPS status is, all kinds of really great information. So you don't have to constantly check this every 2 minutes, but make sure you know where this is, because this is a great way to really see how your ADS-B system's performing. I mentioned ADS-B out. If you do have it, there's an additional information in ForeFlight here. You can see all kinds of things, your ICAO address, 978 or 1090, what you're reporting out. This is a great way to check what your panel-mounted ADS-B out avionics is really doing. Also accessible from that same Stratus status menu. You can see where ADS-B ground stations are. This is kind of handy if you're in an area of marginal coverage and you want to see where the stations are and if you're going to fly at a range. In Garmin, you can go to the devices page and look at the GDL39 page and see where they are. In ForeFlight, it's in that settings menu again. You can turn on a little button there that says show ADS-B ground stations and see where they are. I don't fly with it like this all the time, but every once in a while it's handy to check and see where they are. If you're going to charge, if you have a battery powered unit, make sure you know your device's battery life. For Stratus and Clarity, it's about 8 hours. For Garmin Dual and iLevel, it's more like 3 to 5 hours. Most of these have big batteries like your iPad, so you need to charge it with a 2-amp charger, just like your iPad. Don't use your cheap phone charger. You'll need a 2-amp USB port. And pretty much charge it when you charge your iPad. I keep my ADS-B receiver in a bag next to my iPad. I charge them up both the night before a flight. You can connect to multiple devices with Garmin GDL39. Even though it's Bluetooth, you can do 2 devices. With a Stratus or with some of these other Wi-Fi devices, you can connect to 4 or 5 devices. I like to use this measure tool in ForeFlight a lot. Tap 2 fingers on the map at any one together. You can measure how far you are away from a pilot report, from a radar return. Certainly, this isn't the way to pick through severe weather. In this case, we're on top of it all. But it's a good way to measure how far you are from weather. So I like to use that measure tool a lot. Rubber band flight planning is another one of my favorites. Here's an example where your route's going to take you right through that cell. Instead of asking ATC for 10 degrees left and 10 more left and 10 right and really kind of getting on his nerves, tap and hold your course line, drag it out of the way so it clears the weather by a nice margin, let go, and just change your flight plan. I found that ATC is very receptive to that. Just say, hey, I'd like to change my flight plan, direct here, then direct destination, keeps you away from the weather. They can put that in the system. Works quite well. And remember the delay. No, this is not real time. No data link weather is real time. So there is a delay. Don't use this for tactical avoidance of picking through weather. This is strategic planning. Make the deviation 100 miles away, not 10 miles away. And most importantly, I'll close with this. Use your eyeballs. Any data link weather product, even ADS-B, as good as it can be on your iPad, is not the way to pick around storms. It's an aid to that. It's a way to correlate what you see out the window with what you see on the radar. But at the end of the day, your eyeballs get a veto. Just because that cloud on the right isn't painting a red return does not mean you want to fly through it. That is going to be a nasty ride through there. So maybe it's obvious, but in every airplane I fly, the Mark 1 eyeball always gets a veto over any amount of data link weather on board, or even onboard radar for that matter. If it looks ugly, don't fly through it. Quick reminder there about iPad Pilot News. If you missed some of that, I know we covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of good information there, and in a couple days we'll have a recording of this webinar. I'll leave there with my email address. I'm happy to take questions if you think of them afterwards. And in just a minute or two we have left, I'd like to try to answer at least a couple questions that have come in while I've been talking. So Eric?
John, thanks a lot. A wealth of information. I'm certainly glad that we're going to have this available as a recording. Go back and watch it. I'll try to, in terms of the questions, because we do have so many, to kind of group them and ask you a few things just generically, if you will. The first, let's go back to the description of ADS-B traffic. And you discussed the 978 UAT transmission versus the 1090 ES. Could you talk or just recap a little bit about under what circumstances would one be receiving the 978 UAT traffic versus the 1090, or both?
Sure. So complicated question for sure. Let's take an example. Let's say I have, again, a Stratus. A Stratus is dual band in, so it receives traffic on 978 and 1090. In that case, I'm going to receive air-to-air, so direct from other airplanes, everybody who's equipped with ADS-B out. And that's great, but I'm not going to see everybody else who has just a Mode C transponder. And so that's where the ground station comes in. The ground station tries to fill in the gap and pump up to me the airplanes that aren't ADS-B out equipped. And so that's a great sounding system. The problem is I only get that traffic updated to me if I have ADS-B out, or if somebody close to me has it. So again, I can always see air-to-air, that traffic, but I can only see that Mode C traffic if I'm receiving it from the ground station.
All right, thanks for that. Also, a point maybe you could underscore. There's still some questions about the ability to meet the 2020 ADS-B out mandate with portable units. Is that at all possible?
I guess never say never, but I think it's highly unlikely. Again, it's like having an IFR approach GPS, right? You cannot go shoot an instrument approach with your Garmin 796 handheld. Doesn't matter how good that Garmin is, it's portable, it's not certified, it's not permanently installed in an airplane. Same thing, ATC is using ADS-B out to separate airplanes, to keep your Cessna from hitting a Boeing. And I just don't think they're ever going to let that be done with a portable device. I don't think I don't think they're going to let that happen. So everything they've said, and I believe them, is that ADS-B out has got to be a panel mount thing.
This is one just maybe for your comment for a second. Does the ADS-B out mandate, does that mean an end? Is there a place for aircraft that won't be ADS-B out equipped? Like, for example, the aircraft that are still flying without electrical systems?
Sure, I think so. I mean, there's plenty of airplanes flying around today that don't have Mode C transponders, right? And so if you fly in the country far away from a big airport and off a grass strip in a J3 Cub, you're not going to have ADS-B out. I don't think it makes that airplane worthless anymore. If you want to take it to a Class C airspace airport, certainly then you're going to have that. But I think there's plenty of people out there who don't fly in controlled airspace like that, so you won't have to do ADS-B out.
I'm going to jump in and take one. I want to acknowledge many of the participants this evening that asked very specific questions about the type of equipment they had in their own aircraft and what additional they may do. And what my response to all of you who have sent those in is contact maybe a trusted local avionics shop. It would probably be your best option to get some of those scenario type questions answered. And if you don't have someone local, even Sporty's very own Cincinnati Avionics, CincinnatiAvionics.com would certainly be able to answer some of those questions. Finally, John, a lot of users looking to see if you might have any insight or what you could offer in terms of what's next for ForeFlight and Stratus. What new features might we be looking forward to soon?
Oh, I won't try to predict the future because I know the guys at ForeFlight are always like all these app developers. I mean, look at the progress all these apps have made over the past even just 12 months is phenomenal. So I can say that I don't know anything today that's coming, but I guarantee that there is something coming. I mean, certainly these portable ADS-B receivers and these apps have just exploded in popularity over the last couple of years. So I'm sure there's more coming.
Okay, great. With that, I know we're a little over our allotted time for this evening, so I wish to, on behalf of John and the entire Sporty's team, thank everyone for joining us this evening. I will make mention that for those of you who may be attending the AOPA homecoming fly-in, which is just this weekend, John will be one of the featured presenters at that event. You can hear him live on Saturday at 10:30. He is going to be speaking on advanced iPad flying. Also related to advanced iPad flying, that does happen to be the very next free webinar presentation that Sporty's will be hosting, and that's coming up on November 13th. So if you haven't registered, please check back at sportys.com/webinars. Get yourself signed up, and then also, of course, check back for that video archive. So again, on behalf of the entire Sporty's team, thank you very much for joining, and have a great evening.